basically killed by a knight, and Tyr has to jump in and basically intercept it, and cause herself
She
to
gets
be
hurt.
injured in
Yeah.
the process.
Yep. The first time he kills somebody, he has a moment. The first time he kills somebody, it's just, as big of a shithead as he is, he feels like the most human character in the Tales series. Like the one character that feels like what a normal person would go through, having had to go through this journey.
Which is hilarious because he's like he's the token non-human character of the group.
Right.
Depending on how you,
it's Luke.
I mean, Mew's more human than Luke is at times. Or Thing, as he refers to him as.
Thing.
That's actually a skit later on too, where after he gets nice and stops referring to him as Thing, Mew gets all like offended. He's like, "But that was the name you gave me, Master." And it's like, oh, shit. Hey guys, I'm Bill, a one-time Instagram blogger and now a podcaster.
And I'm Alex, the chaotic neutral.
And together we are the Gaming and Collecting Podcast,
A brother-sister duo.
that talks about gaming.
And also anime.
And don't forget the collecting, sometimes.
Ah, forget it. We're just a nostalgia podcast at this point.
But anyways, guys, thanks for joining us as we discuss the games that shaped us. So, everybody, Alex is still away on her temporary hiatus. So, in the meantime, I am once again bringing in another guest to help me with this next episode. For this episode, I have Chris from A Novel Console. How you doing, Chris?
Doing great. Thanks for having me on. I've been listening to your show a lot lately because it's the perfect length to take me an hour to work and an hour back home. So even though you've released on Saturday, I managed to catch it between Tuesdays and Fridays. So you guys had the perfect length show for me. And I was listening to a Dragon Ball episode today. Man, you brought me that back with that comment that Chi-Chi is milk in Spanish, because of Chi-Chi meaning breasts in Mexican Spanish.
Yeah, it's funny because like me and my buddy Matt, we had just started our side series that we're going to be doing, Geek Addicts, and we thought it was fitting to do Dragon Ball as our first episode because that's partially kind of how we met. And God, that almost went 4 hours. That was a crazy one.
It's great, dude. I think I managed to listen to like maybe 40 minutes of it today. I'm gonna try to finish it all tomorrow. But it just, like, you guys talk about like all of these different dubs, and it made me think, what was the first dub that I listened to for Dragon Ball? Because I watched it way before it was ever on Cartoon Network. And I remember that it ran in a block where they had the Mega Man show. And then right after Mega Man, they had Dragon Ball. So I don't remember which dub it was. All I remember is that I fell in love with it when I saw Yamcha die to the Cyberman.
I'm going to guess it was probably the Ocean dub because I know that was like probably the most well-known dub for Dragon Ball at the time.
It could be. Could very well be. But that's for 7-year-old me to remember and figure out at some point. So.
Yeah, that was a blast of the past. I mean, it's kind of cool because like there's a lot of topics that me and Alex just like can't talk about for GNC just because Alex only has so much information on her that she can really get out there, and I'm not going to force her to like play some obscure video game or like watch some random thing for for a spoiler for Geek Addicts. We're going to be talking about Star Trek pretty soon, and like that's a topic that I know Alex just had no interest in because she just doesn't care for sci-fi at all. So it's going to be fun to change it up.
That's another one that's like completely over my head because man, Star Trek is dense.
Yeah, it really is. That's funny. I'll go from that and then I'll be doing like 3DO with Thrak over on when that show comes back, and it's like so many different so many different personalities. I'm like swapping between. It's
Right. So it shouldn't be like the GNC podcast network. It should be Bill's niche topics podcasting network.
kind of. Oh man, I'm kind of by myself lately though. All my co-hosts are temporarily away at the moment, but hopefully by December I'll be back up and running fully.
Oh yeah, yeah. These next 2 weeks and here and by the end of November are tough, but after that, until Christmas, it should be pretty smooth sailing.
Yeah, that's for sure. But anyways, so moving on to our topic for this episode. So this is one that I've been wanting to talk about for a while, but it's also one of those topics that it's a series that I just can't get Alex into because it's very hard to get her to play an RPG as it is, and it's got to be one that she's really into. And ironically, I feel like these are games that she would like because she's a big anime fan, but they're also a lot of game, and that's kind of what makes it hard to recommend them to people. And for those who don't know, I'm referring to the Tales series. And the reason I wanted to have Chris on this episode was because he's one of the few other Tales fans that I know of through like the podcasting community that has played more than say like Symphonia or Vesperia or maybe even Arise at this point.
I I have played a lot of them. I have finished a handful of them, but I feel like from what I've played of all of them, I've kind of gotten the gist. And just the fact that these are long anime like RPGs, but they're also pretty much beat 'em ups in their combat system.
Mm.
These just hit like so many notes for me. And they're like a winning formula for my perfect RPG.
It's funny, like the Tales series is like a weird one where like I swear like everybody knows about the Tales series, but like only a handful of people actually play them.
Right. Now, I got to ask you, have you ever played Star Ocean?
I have. It's actually Star Ocean is partially how I got into the Tales series.
So is it similar at all, or is it slightly different?
So you know the story about Triace, right?
No, I don't.
So this is where it's actually kind of fun. Going back to like the original Tales team, back when they were known as Wolf Team, they made Tales of Fantasia, and then during the around like the end of the production of Tales of Fantasia, a portion of the original Wolf Team kind of had a falling out with the remains of the team that worked on Fantasia. And they split off and formed Triace, and Triace then went on to make Star Ocean, which was essentially their vision for the future of the Tales series. Only it was more. It's basically like I always like to refer to Star Ocean as the tale. It's Tales of if it was a space opera, basically.
Makes sense. Yeah.
They've
But
since like
mhm.
kind of. I was going to
No,
say
no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
they've since kind of branched out and become more of their own thing. But you can very much tell playing like, especially like the first two and three to a degree, that there was a lot of Tales DNA there.
I see that makes sense because I've looked at gameplay for the one that just came out, Second Story R, and
Yes.
it looks a lot like Fantasia if it had a 3D battleground instead of the 2D plane for the fighting.
Hmm.
But the thing is, I don't know if it's like you have your Berserias or Symphonius or whatever, where it's basically a beat 'em up with special abilities. Because I never played them. I wanted to, but I've just never had the time to sit down and go into them.
It's very similar. It's kind of like imagine if maybe a bit more RPG-ish than Tales is in terms of like stats and management of all that stuff. But the core gameplay is very actiony. Like I've always described like the Tales gameplay as imagine a action RPG. Imagine an action RPG that plays like a turn-based RPG, kind of
Okay.
like kind of in the
Uh,
sense that like when you explore the world map and then you'll enter into like a random encounter, but then it's suddenly an action RPG beat 'em up.
Okay, that that description kind of makes me think somewhat of like the combat in Project X Zone or Project Cross Zone or whatever it was called, where you would start the fight and you would do basically all of the attacks until you were out of attacks. But this one just keeps going, more or less.
Kinda, yeah.
Okay. All right. I I need to buckle down and just play one of them because man, I have a buddy that's in love with them, and every time one comes out, he's like, "Are you playing Star Ocean? It's so good." It's like, no, I'm not playing it.
Yeah, I'm not the best at explaining like the combat systems, but like it's very Tales like. It's just a bit more RPG-ish, I guess you could say.
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, interesting. Gonna gonna have to bump that up on my to playlist.
Yeah, I definitely recommend the second story. That's like arguably the best one in the series. The third game is also really good, but it has like this really bizarre plot twist in it that kind of throws some people off the game.
Is it what was it called? Till the end of time?
Till the end of time, yeah.
Yeah, I know the plot twist.
Yeah.
It's super weird.
Yeah, it turned a lot of people off to that game. That's what I'll say. I thought it was kind of funny. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," but I'm not going to
Does it
spoil it for anyone that hasn't experienced it. But
doesn't the plot twist happen like 3/4 of the way in?
yeah,
Like you still have like a whole quarter of a game left, but you
yep,
already know the plot twist.
yep. It's like one of those like, oh, that's why a lot of people haven't finished that game.
It's a weird place to put a plot twist like that.
Yeah. So I got to ask, what was your first Tales game you played?
Symphonia.
Okay.
Back on the GameCube. So I've talked about this a couple of times in my show. When I was growing up, I had a neighbor across the street whose parents owned a a laboratory where people go get their lab tests done. So they had a lot of money. They had a lot of fucking money. So he had every single game that you can think of.
Oh
So he
wow.
was basically the game dealer in the neighborhood. Like he would just tell people, it's like, hey, you should play this game, and he would give you a copy to play it. And then, so one day he just starts talking to me about Tales of Symphonia, and he goes upstairs to his room and brings down a copy, and he's like, here, play this. I'm like, I don't know. RPGs aren't really my thing. I like Final Fantasy VI, but it doesn't. I'm not good at it. The whole stats and numbers and min maxing, because English is not my first language, and by that time, I was in maybe early middle school, so I wasn't as fluent in English as I am now. So it some things just really didn't make sense. But once I saw that it was a beat 'em up, I was like, oh shit, yeah, this is for me. So I went straight through the entire game, and the story just captivated me because by that point I hadn't played a game with such an adult story
Hmm.
where you're tackling topics like racism, uh tackling topics like religion, self-sacrifice, uh acceptance, all of that. And
Hmm.
I was like, holy shit, this is what games can be. So Symphonia was big for me.
Yeah, it's crazy how many tropes the Tales series really covers, like in every one of their entries, and it's always like very uniquely done. Like these games they get a lot of crap for being kind of cliche in a lot of ways, but they do cover some pretty unique things, especially for like the demographic that they're kind of like reaching towards.
Right. And a lot of these games really do what they set out to do well. Which one was your first Tales game?
So I'm not sure if I've ever told the story about how I got into the Tales series on the pod, but so I've mentioned in the past that we were a PlayStation family growing up, so we only had like PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2, basically throughout the up until the Wii was our first non-PlayStation console, I want to say. So during that period, it was very interesting because like despite the PS2 being like the clear number one console of that generation, just in terms of sales, the area that me and my sister lived in at the time was a very Nintendo centric like area. Like I swear we were like the only PlayStation family in like that block. Like everybody had GameCubes. And it was always really funny to me because I'd go over a friend's house and they'd have a PS2. And I'd always be like, "Oh, do you have any games?" And they'd all be like, "Oh, that's just our DVD player." And I'd just be like, "Okay."
Damn, wish I had a DVD player like that back then.
It's funny how many people the DVD. It really says a lot about the fact that the DVD player sold that console.
Right? Can you imagine being back in that time and being like, "Oh, I'll just pay $200 for a PlayStation 2 instead of paying 300 for an actual DVD player."
It's insane that DVD players were that expensive when they first came out.
Oh yeah, it's insane.
But anyways, going back to my story, so it was like GameCube Central. It was actually the same with PlayStation and N64 at the time too. Like we were like the only people with the PlayStation, and everyone else had N64s. And as a kid, like at the time, I wasn't young enough to really realize I was arguably in the better situation in terms of game variety. But like seeing all like those Mario parties and like just the N64 library in general, and then the GameCube library to an extent, like especially with like Melee, I was always like super jealous because I was like, they got these awesome games and I've got a PS2,
Right.
ignoring the fact
That
that PS2 had pretty much everything the GameCube
yeah,
could do, just more.
that's how I felt for a while because I bought my own GameCube when I was like 13 or 14, and everybody else was playing PlayStation 2 games, and I was like, at least I got Zelda. So,
Yep. But to wrap it back to the Tales series now, so I would visit the one of my friends who had a GameCube at the time, and he was like the kid that had pretty much every game for GameCube. And I remember he was playing Tales of Symphonia one day, and I saw it, and I was kind of like, "Oh, that's cool." It's like, "Is that on PlayStation 2?" And I looked at the case and saw the only on GameCube label on it, and I was like, "God damn it, another one." So then I went
right.
to I went to GameStop like a week, month or so later, and I was just browsing the shelves, and I noticed two Tales games sitting on the shelf for the PS2, and I immediately was like, "Hey, we have one of those too." And I kind of had the choice. I could only get one at the time. And I had the choice between these lovely titles, Tales of Legendia and Tales of the Abyss. And I took
Oh
one
boy.
look at I took one look at Legendia's cover, and I was like, something about it just, I don't know. I was kind of like, I don't know about that one. And then I looked at Abyss and I was like, that one's the one. Like I went and was like, I don't know what it was about Legendia's cover that just kind of like turned me off as a kid, but I think it might be the art style because Abyss's art style was more similar to the one that Symphonia had at the time. Uh, but I ended up picking up Abyss and I started it up, and I remember being floored. I was like, "Hey, the characters aren't chibi, and like they're actually realistically proportioned." The game runs at half the frame rate, but hey, it's a Tales game on PS2.
Yeah, I kind of went through the same thing, but I bought like you did Abyss first, and then I found out, I think it was through Game Informer or some shit like that, that there was another one, which was Legendia. And I think I had finished Abyss and I went and bought Legendia. And I started playing it and I was thrown off by the fact that it's a side-scrolling uh
Yeah,
fighting system. And then there's one of the characters that's voiced by the same voice actor as Kratos. And it's like, this is weird. I have Kratos on GameCube. Why do I want him on this Tales of game as well? And then you go through the story and you get to a point where you think the game is over, and that's like a third of the game.
yep.
And then you have so much more game left. And I was like, I don't like this game enough to continue playing it, which is a shame because I like Senel a lot. Senel Coolidge is a very cool character, but
Yeah,
the
it's
game is not.
Legendia is a weird one. Like it is the so it, for those who don't know about the Tales series, after Tales of Eternia, which was the third game in the series released, the team actually Wolf Team had by that point transitioned into Namco Tales Studio, and Namco Tales Studio kind of split in two at that point, and there was one team known as Team Destiny, which was focusing on the 2D entries in the series, like very similar to Tales of Destiny, Tales of Eternia. And then there was a second team known as Team Symphonia, which made the 3D games from Symphonia onward. Legendia was a weird offshoot because it wasn't made by either of those studios. It was made by this, like, I think it was like, it had a weird name. It was like Project something. Should have should have brought this up for the episode. Apologies there. So it was Project Melfes is the name of the team that made Legendia. And apparently they were. Oh,
no, go ahead. I'll get to it eventually.
Okay, I was going to say apparently they were a team that consisted of members of the Tekken team, the Soul Calibur team, and there was one other Namco franchise. No, it was just Tekken and Soul Calibur. It was basically those members from those teams, and they threw their hand at making a Tales game.
What the fuck? Okay, so hearing that, it almost makes me want to download the game and try it again. Because obviously the Tekken and Soul Calibur team are very talented because they've made amazing fighting games. And, I always kind of associated having the two teams, a team that makes the Symphonia, Abyss, Vesperia like Tales of, and then there was a lower, slightly terrible team that made Legendia, and I assumed that the team that made Legendia was the same team that made Graces and Graces F, because I did not like that game at all.
We're gonna have some beef later.
No, I know, because the first time you said, "Oh, it's one of my favorites," I was like, "Really? Why?"
We'll get to it later.
Yeah, we will.
But yeah, so I always say I dodged a bullet not picking Legendia first because Tales of the Abyss, for a long time, was my favorite game of all time. It was overtaken by Persona 4 Golden when I had played that around 2012. But Tales of the Abyss is still a solid number 2 in terms of my favorite video games of all time, because that game, the amount of time I put into Tales of the Abyss so that came out in 2006 or 5-ish. It was around that point of time. I was still in elementary school at the time, so I was pretty young. And I didn't have the best motor skills when it came to RPGs, so it took me a long time to finish Tales of the Abyss. But at the same time, I really got my money's worth out of it, I'd say.
Right. So I was in high school when I got that game. 2005, I was 15. But I didn't play it till I was like 17 because I remember getting it for cheaper than what a PlayStation game cost back then. Mm-hmm. And I got it after my first summer job, which was when I was 16. So I also wrote a paper for my English class about Tales of the Abyss because I was failing the class, and the teacher's like, just write an essay, and I wrote an essay about it, and I passed the class.
I did that same thing with Final Fantasy VIII.
That's awesome. But damn, dude, you were in elementary school when you played that game. So that for you must have been like what Final Fantasy VI was for me, because I played Final Fantasy VI for the first time when I was in like 6th grade, I think. And I had a horrible time with it, but I loved every second of it.
It's really funny because like I had seen my friend playing Tales of Symphonia, and the thing about Tales of Symphonia right off the bat that you notice is that the main character is like a ball of positivity, like right off the bat, like Lloyd. And then
right, it's also Robin. So
yeah. What's funny to me is though, like you go right from that to Tales of the Abyss, and I remember jumping in. I'm like, why is the main character such an unlikable piece of shit? Like right off the bat.
Right.
It was very off-putting to me, like as a kid, because I was like, I wasn't used to like an RPG where the main character was deliberately made to be unlikable.
Yeah. And then to me, it was the way that he treated Mew. Like I was like, why? It's just a little. It's a little cheagle. It's cute. It's adorable. Why are you such a dickhead to it?
Yeah. I mean, you find out later why he's the way he is, but it's that first third of the game is rough. And I think it's the main reason why a lot of people can't get into Abyss.
It is rough to get through. Not Lloyd. Luke Wise. Luke is awful, but the rest of the party is incredible. I cannot tell you what other Tales of game has a party as solid as the Abyss
Oh
has.
yeah.
Because
I always
you have Jade, who's incredible, Tyr, who's fantastic, even Natalia, who is at first portrayed as this princess who can't do anything, but she ends up being very resourceful and very pro people in some scenes. Like the entire cast of characters in that game is fantastic. So I think that because the surrounding cast is so great, it helps you get through Luke being such a piece of shit.
yeah. Because I remember like playing it and I was at first I wasn't sure what to think because he's really people who've played it understand, but he is something in that first couple hours of the game. But
Oh yeah.
like as you play, like you immediately are paired with Tyr, and Tyr is like the perfect like polar opposite to Luke. Because she is like no nonsense, like we gotta stop being a she like basically berates him the entire time. Anytime he's just an asshole for no reason. And
Right.
then Jade shows up, and Jade is like literally I'm pretty sure he is like one of the originators of the term like deadpan snarker. Because he's just a sarcastic like dickhead, but like in like the best way possible.
Right. And on top of that, he is and it's not shown the entire time, but there's the rumors of him being like this ruthless killer or evil dude, and he's just not but he can fuck somebody up if it comes to in a fight, and he is ruthless because there are times where he just seals somebody's phone on slots and they're fucked for life. There's nothing they can do about it. And Jade's like, I didn't kill you, but now you can't do what you have to do.
Hmm. No, he is like he's awesome too, and like one of my favorite things is with him is like the first time you play as him, he is like OP as shit, and they actually
Right.
they nerf him story wise in the start of the game just to bring him back down to like normal levels because they're like, yeah, we can't give you that right to start the game.
It was like in the Force Unleashed when you start with Darth Vader and you're
Yeah.
ripping through this Wookiee city. It's kind of like that, but they bring you back to nothing.
Hmm.
And then
Even the
that's a whole like story arc, a separate arc on itself of Jade releasing the seals that he has on himself to be as strong as he was at the beginning of the game.
hmm. No, and actually that brings up a perfect time to transition into like one of my favorite aspects of the Tales series is the skits.
Oh yeah.
So for people who don't know, the skits are essentially they're basically like the party chat system from the Dragon Quest series, where essentially like during gameplay you'll occasionally get a prompt on screen that you can click on. There sometimes they're random, other times they're plot relevant, or like say you buy something in the store, they're context sensitive. But you click on these and you get a little cutscene of like all the characters in like little boxes, basically like just chatting about some random thing. And tragically, they were not dubbed for the American releases up until Vesperia, I want to say was the first one. Um, but in Japan, they were always fully voiced, which I was always kind of bummed by, especially because like Tales of the Abyss, in my opinion, has like one of the perfect casts.
Yeah. Yeah. Did they not voice them on the 3DS remake?
No, so the
No.
fun fact about the 3DS remake, it is a straight port of the PS2 version with the button prompts changed. It runs slightly better, and there's some hotkey touchscreen mechanics, but other than that, it's an identical game.
Okay. All right. I mean, that's not bad. It's portable. I mean, so
It's literally a perfectly functioning portable way to play Tales of the Abyss, which is
it,
perfectly fine in my eyes.
right. That's fine. I mean, that's better than what they did with the last Symphonia port.
Yeah,
So
I mean that's a port of an inferior version of the game that we never
right.
got.
It's sad when you say the best way to play Tales of Symphonia is on the GameCube.
Because a lot of people don't realize Symphonia was ported to PS2. It just never came out over here, which is a common theme in the Tales series because the running joke of the Tales series is that Bandai Namco hates us in America for whatever reason. Um, but yeah, so like we never got the PS2 port, and there was in the early days of the Tales series, there was a running joke where we wouldn't get the better version of a lot of the games because they would release the games and then they would port them later with added content. But a lot of the times we just never get those ports, like with the bonus stuff. Later on in the series run, though, we ended up not getting the original versions, and we would get the ports. So I mean, hit or miss there.
Damn. Yeah, I didn't know any all about that. I thought that they would just do the typical thing of it's released in Japan. We could do a couple of fixes and throw it out in the West and let it sink or swim.
Yeah, it's funny because the series has been kind of like up and down in terms of popularity over here. Like certain game, like Symphonia did very well, but I believe like Destiny and Eternia before it weren't particularly big sellers. I don't think Abyss sold particularly well, mostly because I think the majority of the people who like the Tale series were GameCube owners. That's just
That makes
speculation.
sense. No, that makes sense. I have never played the PS1 games.
Mhm.
I downloaded them onto the Steam Deck, so I'm planning to correct that mistake at some point in the future. But I have never played them, and I had never heard of Fantasia until after I played Abyss and saw some kids in high school playing it on their Game Boy. So I was like, "What was that?" And they're like, "Oh, it's Tales of Fantasia." I was like, "There's a Tales of on the Game Boy," um, which I've never beaten either. I've never gotten too far into it, so that's another game that I need to play through because the cast of characters in that game is I want to say it's pretty recognizable, even if you don't know the names.
Mm,
You look at these characters, you're like, "Oh, those are from Tales."
yeah. No, I love
But you know, mhm.
Fantasia's a good one. I have a translated ROM cart of the original Super Nintendo version. It doesn't save, so I might have to find a solution to that. But I've been meaning to give it a full playthrough because I've heard the original Super Famicom version is better than the GBA port. For a number of reasons. I don't really know exactly because I've only ever really played the Game Boy Advance version. I thought it was fine for what it was.
I mean, but it's also a Super Nintendo game that they ported over to the Game Boy Advance, and I don't know how old the game is, but it's on the Game Boy Advance. Like, how much can you expect from it? You're
Yeah,
not going to get Earthbound, right? You're not going to get
no,
Mother 3 quality out of it because it's such a. 'Cause the Tales games are they're kind of like beat 'em ups. You earn skills and new abilities as you're playing, and you actually have to map those out to pretty much hotkeys so that you can do them. So your move set has the potential to be so big that I'm sure a Game Boy game or a Super Nintendo game would have a hard time with the combat system.
true. Um, so going back to Symphonia now, like Symphonia is an interesting one because it that one I think out of all the plots is goes like all over the place very fast.
Yeah, I would say so. Um, it what are something about Symphonia that you really like maybe a story beat or like a dungeon or something about it that stuck with you after playing it all these years?
For me, it is the fact that like pretty much every like character in that game has their own like little character journey that they kind of go on at one point throughout the game. Like even like the later like party members you'll get towards the end of the game, like still they have their full backstory explanations that you actually get to experience. And what's interesting about the Tales series to me is like you can miss a lot of stuff if you're just not paying attention.
Right. I feel like the series is very good for giving you a reason to explore and do everything.
Hmm. No, it really is because like I always say, like playing a Tales game, you almost need a guide to really get everything if you're not like gonna be like scouring the map like for every little minute detail. Like to me, like one of the biggest moments of like a very easy to miss like aspect of the game was Tales of the Abyss is one of the earliest side quests that you can find is Tears Pendant. And
Right.
Tears Pendant you can completely lose by just not talking to this one random NPC that you find in the desert city very early in the game. And if you don't talk
Yeah.
to him, it's gone. It's just gone forever.
Damn. Man, these games, they are. I've only played a little bit of Arias. I think I put like 8 hours into it before something else came along and distracted me. But I don't think it does anything as deep as that. As a not talking to an NPC can lock you out of a quest for the rest of
Yeah.
the game.
Yeah, like it's funny how like there's just a lot of moments, and Abyss is I think the most infamous for that, where like you can legit uh miss so much content just by not talking to NPCs or missing like minor story plots.
Right. Yeah. That going back to Symphonia. So like one of the first things that got me that I was like, holy shit, was at the beginning of the game. There's the science camp near the first city that you're at, and one of the party members, Genus, has a friend who is in that camp. And to correct me if I'm wrong, but the science are half human, half elf.
I believe so, yes.
And the people that they put in their camps are elves or are they humans?
I think they're humans.
Okay. So Genus is a half elf, half human, and his sister Rain too, right?
Mhm.
Okay. So Genus has this old lady friend in the camp, and the Science find out about it. And what they do is they decide to attack the city where Lloyd and Genus are from, and they take the old lady, fit her with a is it an X sphere? I don't remember the name of the spheres that they have.
I think they're called Xpeers.
Yeah, so they fit her with one, but they don't put like a power choker on it, and because of that, the power of the sphere takes over her and mutates her into this giant monster, and then they force Genus and Lloyd to fight and kill her.
Yes.
And that doing that the first time that I played that game, I was like, "Holy shit, what is this
Yeah.
game?" Like,
That scene in particular is pretty dark. That's up there with Lloyd killing not Lloyd, with Luke killing an entire city.
right, right, and that one was by accident too.
That one wasn't even his fault. He was forced to do it by the main villain of the game.
Right, and then you have that scene, right, and then throughout the game, Lloyd has this chip on his shoulder against the Defiance where he just wants to kill them all because they made him and his friend go through this horrible thing. And every time that Lloyd gets a chance to kill a Defiant or a captain or whatever, he takes it. Like he's just straight up murdering people left and right. And like I was like, holy fuck, there's a hero in a game that actually does what he sets out to do. Like, I'm not just going to stop him, I'm going to kill everyone, and I am
Yep.
going to do it right. And that it's awesome. And the way that you see Lloyd grow from this bratty kid to this character where he figures out who he is and his lineage, because his lineage is important to his character, and how his best friend is turning from a human into an angel, and the entire journey she's losing her humanity and what makes her who she is, and him not wanting that to happen and wanting to save her from it. it it's amazing. It's fantastic. So good.
So I got to ask, because Symphonia is one of the few in the series that does this. What do you think of the whole like relationship value system that it has?
Relationship values.
So there's you can,
Mhm.
depending on who you interact with, it changes certain character like interactions, and I think
Oh,
there's like a
really?
romance. I think there's a romance subplot thing that it changes as well.
I didn't know about that. That's interesting.
Because I know canonically Lloyd is supposed to end up with Colette, but I've seen
Mhm.
playthroughs where he ends up with Rain, he ends up with Sheena, just
With
depending on.
Rain.
Yeah, yeah. It's
That's
funny to
funny.
me. You know,
That's very funny.
because I know there's certain points in the game where like you can just like there's like skits that are completely
Mhm.
optional, and they're just like skits where Lloyd's just a dick to Colette for no reason, and I'm like, well, what's the point of that? And then I realize, oh, it's relationship values. You're lowering the values there. It's like,
I didn't know that, because I know that there's a very important one towards the end of the game where pretty much all of the female characters in your party ask Lloyd to go out and just visit this beautiful snow city that they're in. And if you deny all of them, Kratos comes in and he's like, we got to figure out what's going on between us. And you guys end up fighting. And depending on if you win or lose, Kratos joins your party and Celos leaves.
okay, I was always wondering how that would happen because like every time I always played, I never got that because I would always, I guess I always accepted one of the girls. I don't know.
Right. So if you deny all of them, then Kratos comes in, and that's after you find out who Kratos is and what Lloyd's deal is and all of that. So it's like a very big moment for them.
Hmm. What'd you think of Symphonia's sequel?
You know, I started playing it. I think I got to the second dungeon, which is after you see Lloyd destroy that city, quote unquote, at like that early in the game. And I like the combat. I like that you had the other party member, and then you can fill out the rest of your party with monsters.
Mhm.
But I didn't put in enough time into it to like actually make an opinion of the game, because the main character was kind of a wimp until he got possessed by this whatever that made him fight.
Yeah. The only thing I remember about the main character is that he's voiced by Johnny Young Bosch. That's like really about it.
He's voiced by the Black Power Ranger.
Yep. He was also a guy in Abyss.
Guy is a great character. I really like Guy.
Guy, honestly, every character in Abyss is so good.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, like Guy's trope of being afraid of women, and then you find out why, and you're like, okay,
Why?
it's not that funny anymore.
You're like, this is a humorous joke, and then it's like, it ain't funny anymore. Like,
Nope.
not at all. So there's a great moment
Mhm.
in Abyss where after Luke destroys that entire city and you end up down in the planet's core, you actually have a confrontation with another character named Ash. Um,
Yes.
have you ever beat Ash there?
No.
I did it once. It is both satisfying and disappointing because it doesn't change anything.
I figured. Um, Ash is a fantastic character, and the way that they sunset him at the end of the game is just chef's kiss. It's so good.
Yeah, the whole interactions between Ash and Luke. I guess I'll put up a spoiler wall here because this is a very important moment in Abyss. So anyone's not played Abyss, just skip ahead probably like 20 seconds or so. The whole Luke is a clone of Ash thing to me is one of the biggest twists in that game.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so good. And the rest of the game, Luke is just trying to come to terms with it, and everybody's like, "You're just a clone." He's like, "But I can't be a clone. I'm Luke. I'm the real one. I'm not a replica."
It's a really weird situation where like he's technically a clone, but he's been alive for 7 years, so he like has like these thoughts of being one person for 7 years, and all these like interactions with all these people that it's like even if like Ash did come back, it's like they can't really just replace them because now they're both individual people at this point.
Right.
Which is I
Right.
think partially why Ash is so butthurt about it, because it's literally at the point where Luke has become the real Luke von Favre at this point, and Ash kind of just has to accept the fact that his identity has been stolen.
Right. But then again, you Ash really can't be mad because he chose this life on his own. He went willingly and he went along with the plan the entire time until he was like, "Oh, I don't like this anymore."
Yeah, he was.
Like, dude, you can't have both.
It's funny too because there isn't even like a jealousy subplot because like Luke doesn't give a crap about Natalia. Like in Natalia, once Natalia realizes that Ash is the original Luke that like was in love with her back in time, she immediately like is like, oh yeah, I don't care about this Luke anymore. This is the one I care about. So it's like I don't even get what
Right.
I don't even get what he's butthurt about.
That the Ash being part of the six God Generals and all of the God Generals having something to do with each member of your party.
Mm.
Again, fucking great. There's the dude that hates Jade in the floating chair, the clone of
Ion.
I forgot his, yes, who hates Jade for some reason. Natalia's dad, uh, Ash. It they're all like
Tier's teacher was one of them.
right, like they all fit the party so well as their not their evil counterparts, maybe like their nemesis.
They're
It's
more
just
like honestly,
great.
they're more like mild inconveniences than anything. Whenever they show up, you're just kind of like, it's like go away.
See, like every time they showed up for me, I was like, yes, I'm gonna get to kick their asses again. And you would have like an all-out brawl, and then at the end they're like, damn you, kind of like a villain of the week type of thing, and they would just go away.
Yeah, it was like the first time they showed up, it was kind of like, oh, these guys are kind of cool, and then like they keep showing up, and you're just like, again. It's like go away, and then you kill some of them for real, and you're like, oh, I
Oh
guess they're
yeah,
not coming back now.
right. Wasn't Ion's clone one of them? Because I think he was dying the entire time, and then at
Yeah,
the end you just kind of like push him over, and he just ends up dying.
yeah, I believe so. It's kind of confusing because like the whole like the way that planet works is weird because it's like the whole planet's like toxic because they've been doing some weird shit in the core, and they had to like raise the planet's outer crust like because that just
Right.
works. And then it's like later on they're like, we're just gonna sink the planet now into the core back again. It's seal the gas inside. And it's like,
Right.
oh shit, it doesn't work. What do we do now?
Like then everything's just made out of phonons. So fire's made out of phonons, water's made out of phonons, humans are made out of phonons, and then out of nowhere they discovered a seventh one, which was sound. And then sound is just like the end all be all phonon that can destroy anything.
That's why if you don't have tier in your party, you're not playing the game right.
Right.
I'm
But then
pretty sure every single party has Luke, Tier, and Jade, and then they just alternate whoever the fourth party member is.
I try to keep Guy there the entire time.
I believe that is like the most common party member is Luke, Tier, Jade, and Guy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a solid party because you have your healing with Tyr, your heavy magic with Jade, and then two brawlers with Luke and Guy.
Hmm. We should probably mention too the thing that Abyss introduced to the series The free running.
Yes. Actually, yes, from the start, because in Symphonia you had it. If I, mm,
So
I'm not
Symphonia, I've
so.
read they kind of like experimented with it, but the AI wasn't programmed properly to deal with it, so it kind of broke the game.
If I'm not mistaken, I think there's an ability you can get in Symphonia that lets you free run, but it doesn't let you attack while you're free running. So
Yes, I
you
think
can
that's right.
so you can move kind of like in an arch to get away from like the enemy or to reposition yourself, but you can't attack while you're doing that.
Yeah. I believe that's it because in Abyss they just straight up made free running. Free running changed the entire meta of the combat system because like you can literally that's the only way you can beat Ash in that hopeless fight is you just basically have to abuse free running and you basically do the whole like run in, hit him with your sword, run away method, which is pretty effective. It looks ridiculous, but it's kind of fun to pull off.
Oh man, that's got to be ridiculous. Just go taking
Honest,
pot shots at Ash.
honestly, one of the reasons I always say, like, when it comes to the Tale series, the newer the game you play, the harder it is to go back to the older ones. I feel
Oh
like
yeah,
a lot of that has to do with the gameplay improvements. Because because I played Abyss first, it makes it very hard to play Symphonia nowadays, just because
yeah.
Symphonia feels very bare bones. In
You get you got to go with uh you're playing an old game goggles on, because
mhm.
if not, you're not gonna have a good time.
Yeah, because like even going from Vesperia back to Abyss is hard sometimes because Vesperia basically took a bit everything Abyss did and just made it better
Yeah,
in a lot of ways. Other than maybe story, I don't know if that's controversial or not.
I, I'm gonna be honest. I don't remember anything about Vesperia's story. I beat the entire game. I remember there's a few moments where Yuri leaves to kill some sort of general, comes back, wakes up in the morning, and everybody's like, "Oh, the general died," and Yuri's like, "The general died," or
Mhm.
something like that. Um, but that's all I remember. I remember that Estelle leaves the party for a very long time, and that kind of broke the game for me because I didn't have a healer.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't remember anything else about Vesperia. I barely remember the characters. I know there was Judith, Carol, Yuri, and Flynn.
Flynn was the guest star party member, but he wasn't permanent.
Right, right. That's all I remember from that game. Oh, and Estelle, because obviously she's quote unquote love interest, second character, main character,
Yeah.
whatever.
That was actually one thing I really liked about Vesperia was there was no romance subplot.
Yeah, I mean, just like Legendia doesn't have a romance subplot because the only female character is your sister.
Yeah, that doesn't stop the fandom. I mean, Tales of the Abyss did it best because like it just kind of happens naturally in the background, and you don't have to like you don't have to interact with it.
Right. Yeah. But is Vesperia is regarded as the best one in the series, right?
It's it's the fan favorite depending on who you ask. Because I know it's either like Symphonia is the most popular or it's Vesperia tends to be the two that everyone like clamors over. Vesperia is an interesting one for me because I didn't get to play it until years after it came out because I didn't have an Xbox
Okay.
and the PS3 port never came out over here until the definitive version later down the line.
Right. I played that on 360, which is probably why I don't remember it.
Yeah, you know what? I love the main character in like Vesperia. Like Yuri is probably the most. I love his whole like no shits given attitude for most things. Like, and the fact that he's voiced by Troy Baker just kind of like seals the deal on why he's. It's like it's just such a great performance
I
overall.
I man, I feel like there's a little bit of a missed opportunity there because his name is Yuri Lowell. So he should have been voiced by Yuri Lowenthal.
So you know the fun story behind that?
What?
Yuri Lowenthal was not allowed to audition.
What?
But the reasoning why is actually makes sense, but is kind of like, what the hell? The reason why Yuri Lowenthal was not allowed to audition for Yuri Lowell was because he was the main voice of the main character of the previous game, and they did not want to have the same voice the main character in 2 games in a row.
Wait, who was he? Was he
He's Luke. Yep.
What the fuck? Damn. Such a missed opportunity there.
I know. That's like a running joke for like years. Is like, that would have been perfect. But honestly, Troy Baker, I think, kind of made that role like perfect.
Oh, yeah, no. That was one of Troy's earliest voice acting gigs, right?
That's considered his star-making role. Like, it's between that and Kanji from Persona 4.
Yeah, because he was Kanji before that.
They released like so close together. I'm not sure which one was officially first.
Persona 4 was first because Vesperia was on 360.
Maybe. So Persona 4 was a very late PS2 game. That's why I'm not sure. Let me see. What year did Vesperia come out?
Persona 4.
They released the same year, actually. So.
Oh, really? 2008?
Yep.
So P4 was July 10th.
And Vesperia was August 26th.
Oh, God damn.
So they were
like
very close.
Wow.
Yeah, so I think Kanji was first, but like Yuri was the one that most people remembered him for because he was the main character of the game, I guess.
Yeah, because I remember when I played Persona 4 the first time, Persona 4 Golden, I heard Kanji talking. I was like, is that fucking Booker DeWitt from BioShock? And yeah, it was. And I looked at the credits like, holy fuck, that is Troy Baker. That's awesome.
It's actually kind of sad. In the definitive edition of Tales of Vesperia, there was a bunch, because it's a port of the PS3 version. They actually had a whole bunch of new dialogue that needed to be voiced. And because Troy Baker's expensive, Bandai Namco didn't even bother to like ask him. So he had to be redubbed by Grant George, I think was the guy's name. And the only reason it was him is because Matt Mercer is apparently sick and tired of replacing Troy Baker and everything now. And he flat out refused to do it.
That's funny.
But apparently the kicker is Troy Baker said in an interview that they never asked him and he would have done it regardless because that role meant so much to him. So
yeah, that does sound familiar. I think I've heard that before. Yeah.
Because he came back and did Vincent in the Catherine
he did
remake. So
yeah.
If it's a role he cares about, he clearly would have taken the time to do it.
Oh, yeah.
It's like Laura Bailey in Fruit Baskets. It's like, if it's a role that they care enough about, they'll take the pay cut.
Laura Bailey, isn't that Meryl in Metal Gear?
In the later versions, I think she's Rise in Persona 4.
Rise, okay, yeah.
She's also Sharia in Tales of Graces.
I don't, man. I blocked Graces from my memory. I'm sorry, dude, but I just really didn't like that game. There's so many things about that game that I was like, what?
Well, it is the next one to talk about, so let's, I guess, jump into Graces. So Tales of Graces, fun fact, all the 3D games up to this point were made by Team Symphonia. This is the one exception that was made by Team Destiny.
Okay.
So the team that made so Destiny's previous, so it's really sad because a lot of people don't know Team Destiny because none of their games came out over here. Like, because they did Tales of Destiny 2, Tales of Rebirth, Tales of Hearts.
Hearts is not a bad Tales game. I just wish it had English dubbing.
I know. There was also Tales of the Tempest on DS that was made by Dimps of all studios, and that one was so bad that Namco stopped considering it a mainline entry for a while, and then they changed their mind like a year ago, and now it's a mainline entry again.
Man, I wonder how much that goes for. I don't have that one. I've always wanted to try it, but
So the 3DS games you can get pretty cheap on eBay. Like I think I bought all three of them in a lot for like $60.
that's pretty good. Let me see.
This was like 4 years ago, so I have no idea what it's like now, but
Tales of Tempest DS. Okay, so Japanese goes from $7 to $14. Is there no American version?
no, none of the DS games were released over here.
Oh, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Then
Yep.
I'm going to put a bid in for this one. That's $7.
And the best part is the DS is region free.
Right. This doesn't have English language, right?
No, so you kind of have to. You can either do the. So what I do is I'll normally pull up a translated script and I'll just kind of make it work.
Got it. Okay.
Or you can do one of my buddies. He has an interesting method where he'll take a picture of the dialogue with his phone and then Google Translate it, which I guess also works.
That works. I mean, okay. I'm going to buy that. Yeah, I'm going to get that. That's going to be interesting. So they did the handheld games, and then they did Graces F. But isn't Graces F a remake of Graces for the Wii?
Yes. So Tales of Graces was originally released on the Wii, and then for whatever reason, I don't know why it didn't come out over here on Wii, because you figure the Wii was massively popular out here. I guess
Oh yeah.
it didn't sell as well in Japan, so they ported it to PS3 with added content. And that's the version we got over here, which is Tales of Graces F.
Right.
This game, so I will say this game, if you've never played a Tales game, you might have a different thoughts on it, but if you've played Tales games beforehand, it does a lot of things differently that
Oh yeah.
makes it feel kind of odd at first. And for starters, I'm assuming your biggest issue was the combat system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The combat system broke the entire game for me. I couldn't. I was frustrated more than half of the time playing it.
So it's really weird because like the handheld and like 2D games use this system called CP. Oh god, that is a horrible abbreviation now that I think about it. Okay, anyways, yeah, they use that as their point system, and the 3D games use um a system known as TP, which is like technical points. And the technical point system is kind of what Symphonia, Abyss, and everything used. The
Mhm.
system in Graces is a bit different. It doesn't have your typical like magic points, which is basically what technical points are. Instead, you have this like it's like a counter that replenishes as you fight, and it's basically like so. Grace's free running is incredibly limited. Like when you use free run, it actually lowers your point meter, and you have to actually strategically like move around the battle system now in a different way. Like trying to attack with a sword uses a certain amount of points, and using magic uses a certain amount of points, and it's very much more of a strategic battle system than a all around beat 'em up. Which, considering you told me you love the beat 'em up aspect, this kind of explains why
Yeah.
you don't like this game as much. Um, One thing I loved about this though was there's a mechanic which is like a dodge roll mechanic where you can like your characters are kind of on a pivot point when they're locked onto an enemy, and you can like kind of swivel in like the four cardinal directions around like the enemy like by using a combat point. And when you get used to it, because I will admit it took me a bit to figure out the combat system at first, because I came into this game directly from Abyss, and I will say like that first hour was very frustrating, very fast. Um, the thing is, though, the reason I love this game so much is I love the story in this game.
You know, I can't say that I hated the story because the story was charming. You know, you have the girl that came out of nowhere, the kid who's adopted with his brother, but the brother is preferred, but the kid runs away and he joins the military. He comes back. The girl that came out of nowhere shows back up again, and just stuff keeps happening.
Hmm.
I, I think if it would have had like a more classic Tales of combat system, I would have enjoyed the game a whole lot more.
I feel like that's a big
I
part of it.
I smashed my head against the floor the entire game because I did not want to learn how to increase my points and go through the trouble of increasing my points so that I could do long combos, because you can do pretty long combos if
Oh
you
yeah,
have enough points.
once you master this game's combat, it is incredibly fun to break.
So sometimes I would just go through like an entire boss fight with just 3 points. I would just do like a 3 attack string combo and just keep going like that until I beat the fight. Because man, that combat system, I was not into it at all.
Yeah, that's a fair argument with it, because it is definitely, especially if you like are coming into it after playing the 3 Symphonia games right off the bat, it is a very jarring switch. Even more so once you go to the next game after, which immediately goes back to the normal style. Um, I will
So
say this game. Go on.
go ahead. No,
I
go
was
ahead.
just, I was going to say like the things about this game that I really love are, as I said, the story. It has this very fun time skip mechanic where you start the game out as kids and you play this entire self-contained like portion of the game, and then a time skip happens, and then you kind of have to like rediscover everything that happened in that time skip as adults, and you go on from there, which I really liked. I like the party. Like this is probably my second favorite party in a Tales game, obviously behind Abyss. This game has some really good like winners. Like I love the main character, Asbel is really fun. His brother Hubert he's kind of a prick, but like you understand why.
But he turns
Considering,
into a prick when he's an adult, because when he was a kid, he was just the scared kid
yeah,
the entire
well,
time.
he got basically ripped away from his family because his dad didn't want him to fight over the throne. And of course, what happens when you rip them apart? They fight over the throne because
Right.
parenting. um, you also have the love interest, Sharia, who is like the childhood friend, and she's kind of
Right.
annoying, but that's besides the point. There's the girl Sophie, who's like the mysterious girl from space, who just appears.
Throws hands with anything.
Yeah, yep. Then there's also Richard, who is the prince of the nation, who becomes the villain, and then later becomes your party member in the second half of the game.
Right.
And I'm forgetting the other party members' names right now, but there's one that's kind of like Asbel's instructor, and he's pretty cool. And then there's this inventor artist kind of character who also joins your party, and she's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah, I forgot about all those. I remembered Hubert and Chiria and Sophie. Um, so when this game came out, I remember we were either in the middle or at the verge of a massive Tales of uh release of games on PlayStation, because
Yes.
we had a re-release of Tales of Symphonia on PlayStation. Then we had Celia coming out soon,
Mhm.
and if I'm not mistaken, there was another one. I
Um.
don't.
Well, Dawn of a New World was also around this point as well.
Right. That, yeah. Might have been that. Might have been just that. But we had like all of these games, and like the big one was Celia, because I remember at the time Celia, all the magazines and websites were like, "Oh, this could be a possible Final Fantasy killer." It's gonna do this and this and this, and I was very excited. So that I thought Graces is coming, so we're gonna get a very good Tales of before we get this incredible Tales of coming out. And I mean, I played through the entire game, I beat it, and I had a rough time with it
Mm.
because of that combat system.
Yeah, I can see that because there's a lot of combat in Graces.
Yeah.
But it has such a fun world to explore, which I feel like, honestly, I kind of feel for you because there's that game that must have been such a weird experience. Like, because like so much of that game is great, but then if you don't like the core aspect of it, that probably kills the entire experience.
And you know, I really liked Asbel as a character, and I liked his fighting style because he would kind of fight like uh Virgil does in Devil May Cry. He has his sword in his scabbard the entire time until he needs to pull it out. And once he pulls it out, it deals a shit ton of damage,
Oh yeah,
which is
it,
something that you have to build your meter into so that you can actually get to do all those cool combos.
he's a really cool character because I like his like when you play as him as a kid, he's kind of like an annoying brat, and then
Mhm.
like immediately the second he grows up, you realize, oh no, he's an adult, and like he's actually like grown up now, and you actually see that growing up kind of phase
Right.
of his character, and it works for me in a lot of ways because like when I first played Graces, I thought it was going to be another Tales of the Abyss situation where I'm like, oh, the character is going to start out unlikable and then gradually become likable. But it's like, no, it's actually makes sense because he's a kid at first.
Right. Yeah, and then you see him kind of like pleading with his brother to, you know, kind of have a relationship with him to be at least friendly again. And you have like that being a thing throughout the most of the game while Hubert kind of like brings down his walls. He's like, you know, it's not Asbel's fault that whatever happened happened. So you get to see him be a normal person and not just an annoying kid once he grows
That
up.
that's actually one of the saddest parts of that game is when Asbel gets kicked out of his like hometown after Hubert shows up and basically just like throws him out, and then you're just basically on your own because you get separated from everyone other than Sophie at that point, and it's a really depressing moment. You're like, wow, you're just like straight up like locked out of this part of the game, and now you just have to go off and find out what to do
Right.
next.
Right. See, I wouldn't mind a Graces remake or re-release. Maybe now if I've replayed it, I might might like it knowing what I'm getting myself into now and not just going in blind thinking it's just another Tales of, but
It's also got my
oh,
favorite like skits in the series because the way that they do the skits in Graces is kind of unique. Well, it's not unique
mhm,
anymore because other games have copied it since, but originally the skits were like the characters' portraits would be in these little boxes and they'd kind of just talk in the boxes. Um, Graces was the first one that introduced this idea of just having them all kind of standing in a line next to each other, and they would like shift around depending on the context of the skit, which was kind of interesting. And you get like their full body portraits rather than just their heads.
I think I remember that. Is which is the one with the Basonga skits? Is it
Um,
Celia? No.
maybe I know. Graces has the infamous one talking about peaches.
Okay. All right. So it's not this one.
No.
'Cause there's I actually think it might have been Abyss where Annis is saying that she wants Basongas like
Oh,
tears,
she
and
wants
everybody.
because you pick up a melon. Yeah. And then Tear shows up and she's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like, this poor Tear is not poor Tear does not want to be a fan service girl.
No, she doesn't want to be Jessica from Dragon Quest VIII.
That's actually one of my favorite jokes. Is every Tales game has a beach episode or bathhouse episode because it's an anime basically.
Oh
And
yeah.
for Abyss, you get to the bathhouse scene, and all of the characters you get their swimsuits, and then Tear shows up in this extremely plain conservative swimsuit, and her response was basically like, the one I got was too daring, so I went with this instead. I'm like, that's funny.
That's great.
I also like the fact that she still has her freaking weapons attached while she's wearing it, because of course she does.
Man, Tyr is great. Such a
No,
great character.
she's like the best. She's arguably the second protagonist of that game in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah.
Actually, we didn't
She's there
mention
pretty much the entire time.
we didn't mention it in when we were talking about Abyss, but a spoiler for the ending. But who do you think was that? Who do you think it was at the end?
The character that came out of the rubble.
Yeah,
Oh, that's 100% Luke.
yeah. I've always assumed that there's some people that like to think it's Ash, even though
So-
Ash died.
So that's to me the way that I interpreted it was when Ash died, because I don't think there's souls in that universe. His phonons went off and completed Luke as a person,
Yeah,
and I think that's why Luke walked out of the rubble, because he was finally a real boy, for lack of a better
yeah.
word.
I always had the theory that because when he because his body was deteriorating at that point because of the how they got rid of the miasma, basically
Right.
put him on like death row, basically, because his body was essentially disintegrating. Right at the end of the game, when he's in the rubble as it's collapsing, Ash's body falls to the ceiling and like lands on him. I always theorized that like Luke's subconscious went into Ash's body and they just refused into one. It's the only way that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense too. That explains why he hadn't come out of that hole for a year. He was
also
knocked out for a year. He was in a coma for a year.
It also explains why his hair is long again and why it's like darker red for no reason.
Right. Man, I need to replay that game. That game is so good.
Oh, Tales of the Abyss. I'm still so butthurt that the anime never got dubbed.
But it got subbed, right?
It is subbed. I just prefer dubs, personally.
I mean, it is a very good cast of characters in the game. The voice actors did an amazing job with their characters.
Oh yeah, like Yuri Lowenthal as Luke, like Johnny Young Bosch as
Guy.
Guy. Kirk Thornton as Jade. Tyr's voice actress is the one kind of outlier though, because like she only does games and she's like only in like a very small amount of roles.
Let me see who her voice actress is.
So she goes by a bunch of pseudonyms. The most recent thing I can think of that she's in is she actually plays Morgan in Tales, not Tales, Fire Emblem Awakening.
Dragon. Oh, okay.
She's a female Morgan.
Nicole Balick.
Yeah, so that's like I think her actual name. She has like a few pseudonyms she goes by. I think she was actually in Tales of Legendia as well.
Okay. Never seen her before. Interesting.
Yeah, I guess she's a VA that really only does games and like very specific games.
Yeah. Usually when I think female voice actresses, I think what's her name? Shepard.
Jennifer Hale.
Yes. Because she is incredible in everything she does.
Jennifer
she
Hale.
was in Fire Emblem. Mm-hmm.
Yep. I think Jennifer Hale and like Grey Delisle are like the two that I see in everything now.
Right. Okay, so she is in a bunch of games. It looks like the only thing that she has done like real acting for was Shark Tale.
Oh.
And Hawaii 5-0.
Interesting.
But she's in Onechambara, Fire Emblem, Soul Calibur 6, Fire Emblem Awakening, Samurai Warriors, 2 Human, Tekken 6, Eternal Sonata, Rainbow Six, EverQuest, She's apparently in Persona 4 Arena.
Huh.
Interesting.
I don't know who she played in that.
It looks like it's the other robot girl, not Aegis, the other one with the giant axe and
Oh,
the bull persona.
I'll have to play that.
Yeah.
Oh, Labris.
I think so, yeah.
I'll have to replay that now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she does a phenomenal job as Tyr.
Oh yeah. I feel like this episode is just gonna be us circling back to how amazing Abyss is.
I mean, it's a good game.
And it's a fantastic game.
No matter what Ray says over on the Retrospective server.
He's just trying to pick a fight.
I don't think he listens to my show.
Uh, so after Graces was Celia, right?
Yes. In terms of the ones that were released over here, I want to say. Yeah, it was because the handheld ones were done by this point because I think Hearts was the last one.
Until the remake for Vita.
Yes, but other than like the remakes, I think the last like traditional handheld game was Hearts because the team that made Hearts went on to make Graces.
Okay.
Because while Graces was being made, the Symphonia team was making Zelia. Yep, that's what it was.
Okay. Yeah. I was very excited for Celia. It had dual protagonists with different stories. And from what I remember, it was touted as the Final Fantasy killer. It wasn't.
No.
But it was still a really fucking good Tales game.
to be fair, Final Fantasy was not doing super hot at that point.
No, it was not. Because wasn't that
was the third
13?
13-2, and Lightning Returns 13.
Right. Yeah.
Only one of those games is kind of good. So
I played the original 13 for like 20 minutes and stopped when I got into a fight, and the fight didn't give me any sort of feedback of that I was doing anything. So like you would hit a character and it would just feel like the sword would go through, like if it was like swinging it at the air. And I was like, no, this is not for me. So I didn't play that.
13-2 was pretty good. Celia. But Zelia. So the opening to Zelia is kind of like awesome in a lot of ways. Like, so you get the choice between the two main protagonists in this game. You get either Jude or you'll get Mila. Who did you choose for your first playthrough?
I chose Jude because I thought that the concept of a doctor that throws hands is pretty funny.
Yeah, like the healer being a beat 'em up fighter was pretty cool to me, honestly. Yeah.
And also I really like when Tales does brawler characters like Senel and Jude and Sophie to that extent, because Sophie was a brawler.
Yes.
I really like them because they give them really cool moves. And they also make them really fast and really powerful for some reason.
Yeah. Now, Jude. So when I picked Jude, I think my reasoning was I was tired of swordies at that point because Luke, obviously, sword fighter. Yuri, sword/axe fighter, depending on your choice.
Right.
Asbel, sword fighter, and I was just like, I saw Mila and I'm like, okay, playing as a female protagonist, that's interesting and unique, but she's a sword fighter and I'm tired of that right now. And then I saw Jude and I'm like, I couldn't tell what Jude's fighting style was initially, so I kind of was like, I'll go with Jude, I guess, for now, and maybe I'll change later. And then like I get in the first fight, he's just throwing hands, and I'm like, okay, this is different.
Right. And he was a weird character to me because he was also one of these characters that knows how to fight but doesn't want to fight.
Yeah, he's got that
Gohan thing. Yeah. I was like, that's kind of weird, but then the whole game, I don't remember the story. So just one of those.
Zelia's story is weird. Like, the game is beautiful. I love the way this game looks. Like, so like Vesperia is a very good looking game. Graces is also a very good looking game, especially considering it's a Wii game. Xelia, though, like they really took what the PS3 could do and like pushed that system to a degree. Like the characters look almost like anime characters they almost like are in that bridging stage between like 3D and like 2D kind of in a way.
Right. I remember the cities looking really, really good because they had
Mm.
this unique design where it was kind of like bioluminescent, but also had like technology and shit in it
Mm.
too. The cities looked amazing. I do remember that. And the character models looked fantastic as well. Isn't this the one where Raven is part of your party?
Yes, yep. He's the
Yeah.
voiced by Matt Mercer because I originally thought it was Troy Baker.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, is it Raven? No, it's Alvin. Raven was Vesperia.
Alvin. Okay. Yeah. He had
Yep.
a big, heavy sword, I think, right?
Yeah. And he
Yeah,
kind of
okay.
he kind of gives like shady vibes when you first meet him.
Right. Right. But it turns out to be one of those shady characters who's actually wholesome.
Well,
and
he's
has the interest of the party in his heart the entire time.
like he's shady,
Wow.
but then you find out his intentions are good.
Right.
Yeah. Alvin was cool. There was also Jude's childhood friend who was basically just Natalia.
Right.
Brunette.
What wasn't she like a news reporter or something like that?
Yeah, she kind of went around and did that kind of stuff. There was also the little girl and her butler that were also party members. I can't remember their names at the moment.
Right. The butler. The butler was really cool.
Honestly, Zelia's got a pretty good cast too. Now that I think about it.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think the least interesting character in Zelia is probably Mila.
And doesn't she have like the amnesia thing going on or something like that? Or like she's like a star child or something?
She's like the avatar for that universe's religious figure, I guess, the god of that universe.
Okay.
I forget it's like a I forget what the name of it is. It's like a very like Western style name.
Hmm.
I just remember like she's very much on like her own mission throughout the game, and like Jude just kind of helps.
Right. I know I don't remember a lot of this game actually.
I've
I
only
really
played it
do.
once because it's very long.
Yeah, and then you have to do like a whole other play thing. Oh, the little girl has the little stuffed animal
Oh yeah, that like
that she
talks.
controls, and it actually I think it was her subconscious controls it, so it says what she's actually really thinking.
Yeah, that was like the plot twist with it because at first you just thought it was just this annoying little thing, but then you find out it's actually her inner thoughts.
Right. Right. I remember that.
There's a
I really
point in
don't
this.
don't remember
I,
much of this game. Mhm.
I remember there's a point where Mila gets like crippled at one point, and you have to like find like this like technology to like give her the ability to use her legs again.
I don't remember that.
No,
I honestly don't.
it was a pretty weird segment because I remember it just kind of happens where she gets like blown up during like one of their like missions that they're on. It's a
Oh man. Mhm.
honestly my biggest downside to Zelia is I think the story is just not as memorable.
Yeah, no, that I do remember putting a lot of time into it, but I think I remember the sequel a lot better. So you
Mm,
had Ludger, who had like 4 or 5 different play styles, combat styles, and you had to pay before you could get out of any city. So you had to raise money to pay your next arc in the story.
yeah,
In the
that was
meantime, you met characters from the original Celia.
and they all have these fun new designs, and you're like, oh, that's cool.
Right.
Jude grew. It's like Jude grew up.
Right. It's like he's not wearing a fantasy high fantasy character outfit anymore. Now he's dressed like a somewhat normal doctor.
Yep. And he's still simping for the god,
Oh yeah.
who now has a clone that's running around. That was a weird plot twist.
Man, I need for them to just package these games onto a collection and throw them out on current consoles, because I never finished Celia 2, but I did get pretty far into it.
I will say the Xelia games have arguably the best combat system in the series.
Yeah, they do.
It is so
Especially
smooth.
2. In 2, weren't you able to swap out between combat styles while you were fighting?
I believe you could do that in Xelia 1 as well. Because in Xelia 1 you could switch between characters on the fly.
Right.
I think 2 allowed you to switch the styles, which
Right, because I know Ludger has the 2 knives, but he could also go into, I think, guns and a single sword, if I'm not mistaken.
yes, yep, I believe so.
Yeah, yeah, that was pretty cool.
So after Xelia was actually pretty big for the series because it actually did sell like significantly above Bamco's expectations. And I think part of that is the reason why we started getting more entries in the series suddenly after that. Because like for the longest time, it was like the fact that we were getting any of it. I'm still amazed we even got Graces to begin with. Now that I think about it, but they decided they were going to release some of the more obscure games over here, and the next big one they released was Tales of Hearts R for the Vita.
Yes,
We didn't
I
get
wish
it.
that one. I wish that one had a dub, but it's still pretty great.
So there was 2 Vita games. It was Tales of Innocence R and Tales of Hearts R. They chose Hearts to be the one that got brought over here. Innocence is still forever locked in Japan, but I think it had to do with the fact that Hearts was made by Namco, well, by the Tales studio directly, because I believe Innocence was made by the studio that actually made the Tales of the World games.
Okay.
But yeah, Tales of
That'd say
Hearts.
no. Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say just Tales of Hearts Tales of Hearts R is actually I think one of the most interesting entries in the series.
Doesn't it have kind of like this diving mechanic where you go into like people's hearts or something to release them, and it's kind of like Kingdom Heartsy, but not really.
So it's weird. Like it follows the story of this character named Core. I forget his last name. His name is Core. Even though because they didn't dub this game, the voice says Shing every time he talks because that's his name in Japan. So um, I'm convinced actually. So you know the story about the dubbing situation for this game, right?
No.
So when they brought it over, they basically determined that they could only fit one audio track on the cartridge because it's a Vita game. And they left it up to a vote online for which one, if whether it would get a dub or not. And of course, I'm not going to name names, but the sub only fans basically spammed the vote.
Oh man, they shouldn't listen to the fans. The fans don't know what they want.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
The thing,
it's a mistake.
what bothers me the most about this game is the script was clearly translated with a dub in mind because the script does not match the voice like the character dialogue at all.
Hmm.
Because they say characters' names and they're never lined up with where the script is. Some of the characters have different names. Period. Yeah, I don't understand. Going to this game's story though, this game has an interesting story where Core kind of lives off on his own, and like this brother and sister shows up, and they're kind of like on the run, and Core kind of has the ability because he has this weapon that allows him to like enter people's like inner heart sanctums, which are just dungeons in this game. And because while they're in there, the sister has like a very special one, and they break it. and basically break her in the process. And she spends like the first half of the game as like this basically a emotionless doll. And basically the first half of the game is you're basically going on a quest to find all the parts of her personality, which are like these like crystal cores in the center of people. This is a very wacky plot for a Tales game, by the way. But
Very different.
during the progress, you run into like all these other subplots going on and different like characters. And I don't know about I don't know about you, but I love the characters in this game.
See, I think I got to the second city. I didn't get too far in this game
Okay,
because it's on the Vita, man, and the Vita is murder on my hands. It's too small for me.
gotcha.
But I really want to go and finish this game. I think I might try to find a Vita ROM and put it on the Steam Deck because what I played, I really liked. I really liked the combat system. I like the characters. I found it really funny because most of the game of what I played was the older brother just giving core shit about breaking his sister every single time he could.
Yeah. Also,
Um,
cool
mhm.
original aspect of this game is your main healer is actually the older brother, and he's like a ranged character. I just thought that was an interesting twist because it's usually a female, and they're usually like
Right.
the traditional like mage.
And don't they have like these gauntlets that give them the weapon that they use, and the brother has like one that's a like a bow or something?
Yeah, it's like these wrist like crossbow shooter things.
Right. Yeah. I need to get back to this game. I need to find a ROM and just go through it because this one I did like a lot what I played.
It has an interesting combat system where like because of how they mapped out the analog sticks, they mapped like free running to the analog stick and like the regular controls to the
D-pad.
D-pad. So you can essentially just be free running all the time because of
Huh.
how it's mapped. I played the
That's
game like exclusively free run.
that's pretty cool. Hmm. Yeah, I gotta get to it. Um,
Hmm.
yeah. So what's next?
So after Hearts are there was it's everybody's favorite, Tales of Ziastera.
How is it pronounced?
Ziastera, I think.
I thought it was Cysteria.
Maybe
I
it's
might
that.
I don't
They're
know, dude.
getting so hard to pronounce now that I'm just kind of like, I tried. Ziastera.
So
Um,
is this is a sequel to Berseria, which came after, right?
yes, they're
Okay.
in the same universe, but they're like very loosely tied together.
Okay. I've never played this one. I remember when it came out, I was gonna go get it, but the guy at GameStop was like, "Oh, the frame rate is terrible. Don't waste your money." So I never bought it until recently. I managed to get a physical copy for like $11. But
Oh yeah, because this one came out on PS3 and PS4, I believe.
yeah, it did.
Um, so I forced my way through this one. Um, I will say there's a few things I like about it. Like, so it brought over Tales of Grace's skit style, which was really fun.
Okay.
Um, it also brought back. We haven't really talked about soundtracks yet, but this game in particular brought back Goshina, who did the soundtrack for Legendia, which in a lot of people's opinion is the best part of Legendia.
I had no idea. I
Okay,
don't remember.
I'm a big soundtrack guy, so I know like all the little minute details. But this one was Ziastera had the series main composer Matoe Sakurabora, and then Goshina did collabed on it, so it has a very nice soundtrack.
Okay.
Um, they also this was the game that introduced the idea of not having battle transitions anymore. Instead, you'd run up to the enemies on the field, and then it would go directly into battle from there.
Ooh,
You wouldn't have
that's
like the
awesome.
standard RPG like whoosh anymore.
So it'd
Um,
be like Chrono Trigger.
Yeah, in a sense, like you just basically go directly into the fight. Kind of like Final Fantasy 12 in a sense as well.
That's awesome.
Other than that, though, my big problem with this game is that the story is utterly forgettable. Like I can't name a person in this game's cast at all, and I can't even remember much of the story either because it's such a nothing burger of a story.
Yeah, no, I that's one that I have no knowledge of. I think I have it installed on the PlayStation, and that's about it.
I wanted to like this one so much too because it was the first one on PS4. They hyped it up so much, like because this was during like the Tales Renaissance where they were like, "Oh yeah, the series is strong as it's ever been. Like it's finally picking up in America." And then they released such a mid mid entry in the series that and it basically
Right.
killed any sort of momentum that was going. I think the producer of the series actually resigned from Bamco because of how badly it went.
Damn, that says a lot.
This was
um,
also notably the first entry after they had
mhm,
dissolved Namco Tail Studios and they just merged them into Namco itself. So
okay.
there was no more Team Destiny or Team Symphony. It was all just one group within Namco that was just making Tales games now.
That's kind of sad.
Yeah, you can kind of tell that there was definitely a lot of mismanagement going on in the background with this one.
Mhm.
I feel like they weren't exactly sure where they wanted to go. On the
Yeah,
plus
no,
side, though,
that does sound a lot like what I heard about the game back when it came out.
hmm,
Just it it's a game.
yeah,
That's it.
like I might want to try playing it again at some point just to see if maybe I was just kind of salty about it being. I don't even know why. Maybe it's because I really liked Hearts at the time, and it felt like a downgrade from a Vita remake of a DS game, which put a bad taste in
Right.
my mouth. Um,
I will
but
do it. Mhm.
I will say they made up for it because the follow up, Tales of. So this is another name that's hard to pronounce. Tales of Berseria, I think it's
Berseria, yes.
Berseria.
I hate that they censored this game.
Yeah, that's not great. Um, the game itself, though,
Yeah.
returned to form in a lot of ways. I
Oh
think it's
yeah.
actually the best game in the series for me since Graces, but that's got an asterisk next to it. I think realistically, I think it's like the peak of the series since Vesperia in a lot of ways. And
Yeah.
this game was also very notable for having an exclusively female protagonist.
Yes, Velvet Crow.
Velvet's great. I love
Oh,
Velvet.
she is a fucking badass. And she eats monsters with her arm. That is
Yes.
awesome.
And you take one look at her and you immediately go, wow, what a shameless fan service character, which admittedly, yes, but also
Yeah,
reason there is a reason for that. It's because she wore what she had out of prison.
right. And sh and she has no shame because she's not human anymore.
No, she doesn't really care.
Right. So if she doesn't care,
Velvet's
why
fun.
would you?
Yeah. Velvet was a very big breath of fresh air for a Tales
Yeah.
protagonist. Like, I think she's the most likable one since Asbel in a lot of ways. Nothing against Jude, but Jude is like such a yes man, like nice guy kind of character, and then Mila's just boring. Like that's the biggest downfall of for the first female Tales protagonist. Like Mila was very unremarkable. They
Right.
made up for it with Velvet in pretty much every way.
But I really can't get over the fact that they censored that opening scene that's so powerful when was it her brother-in-law or something? The bad
Mhm.
guy kills her brother in front of her in this very cool looking red moon. He's holding him up in the air and then he kills him, and they censored that entire scene, which is sad. And then she goes on a murdering rampage and turns into a demon with her demon arm that eats monsters.
Yes.
And then she basically has a crew of angels and demons and humans trying to get revenge on her brother-in-law.
Yes.
Like, it's awesome. It's like so fucking cool.
It's funny when you explain it like that, it sounds like a very generic plot, but like the way that they like pace it out and like explain it throughout the game, it's like
Yeah.
you really feel for her, and you're like the whole time you're like, you don't even like she's technically supposed to be like an anti-hero in a lot of ways. Like she's not supposed to be a perfect like paragon character, but at the same time you feel for her and you kind of like
Right.
understand everything that was going on that led to this.
And then you see the way that the humans treat both the demons and the angels. You know, they enslave angels so that they can hunt down demons. And basically the angels have no life or no say or anything in whatever's going on because they're just enslaved. Like the one that manages to break free and become a pirate.
Hmm.
And that's like his whole thing. He's happy just being a pirate because he's no longer enslaved as an angel to kill demons.
It actually kind of amazes me how many Tales games have like a racism subplot like in their games, and like especially like the message that they always portray is like very positive, like in like the sense that this is bad. Like
Right.
you don't see that in a lot of games, especially like not even like I mean, I find it fascinating, especially considering it's a Japanese game, and Japan has not always been the most forward when it comes to like social issues like that.
Right. And then they give you a character like Violet who's turned into a demon and she can see how bad slavery is.
Yeah.
Right.
It's just it's a cool this series is very honestly the fact that it's so overlooked is kind of sad because it's always been very progressive for the time and very like on top of things that a lot of series just aren't yet.
Right. That Berseria was a game that I started and played a lot of but didn't finish. I think I got to the part where the I don't remember her name. Is the holy girl, the one with the red hair, says that she will join your team if Violet proves something or whatever. I think I got
Mm.
to that part and I didn't get past that. So I had seen the moments where Laphicet got hurt and Violet went into some sort of rage mode and killed whoever hurt Laphicet. But I didn't get to the part where he actually joins your party because I think that's later on.
Mm.
Um, I need to finish this game because I feel like it would be it would hit some notes, some highs like Abyss did. Because
Mm.
from what I played, pretty fucking good.
Yeah. This one like to me like so I kind of split the Tales series in half. Like to me that there's like
Mhm.
the earlier series. Well, actually, it's like I split into thirds. There's the early games like pre-Symphonia. Then there's like the middle section, which is like from Symphonia to Vesperia, Graces maybe. And then
Mhm.
there's like the modern era. To me, like Berseria is like the peak of the modern era where like they finally figured everything out and just finally delivered such an awesome game.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Because the one that came afterwards, Arise, I feel like it went too modern and kind of lost a bit of its RPG roots.
It lost, so it's very action heavy. It also notably like removed multiple aspects of the Tales series that had been there forever, notably the multiplayer aspect, which we haven't really touched on yet. But
Yeah.
one key thing about the Tales series that's been iconic for years was the fact that during combat you could actually do multiplayer, and like you could on the GameCube in particular, this was really fun because you could have four players all plugged in at once, and you could control the four party members on screen during combat. which was kind of a fun way to get like your friends into an RPG, even if during
Right.
regular gameplay they were just watching you run around in circles, go through towns. But
So when I played Symphonia the first time, uh, because I was in high school, I would go to my aunt's house and stay there every other weekend. And there was a neighbor that would come over and we would play like Budokai or Smash Bros or whatever. And I was playing Symphonia and I didn't want to stop. And I told him, it's like, hey, it's a multiplayer game. It's like, it's an RPG. It's not a multiplayer game. It's like, just plug your controller. So we started playing. He was Kratos and I was Lloyd. And we put in a good amount of hours into the game. And every other weekend when I would go back, he's like, "Oh, you still playing Symphonia? Let's play some more Symphonia
yeah,
because it's fun. It's very fun."
it really is. I mean, it depended. Granted, the earlier games it depended on which character you were playing as, because I remember I had a friend who like we tried to play Abyss like from the beginning to the end, and I remember like he because like the first real multiplayer moment that happens in that game is it's Luke and Tyr. And I remember
Mhm.
he was playing his Tyr and he was like, he's like, this sucks. I can't figure it out. And I'm like, all right, give me like an hour and then you'll understand what I mean. So it's like an hour later, we finally get Guy on the party. And I'm like, okay, play as Guy. You'll understand from here on. Because
Yeah, no, the magicians are hard to use. They take a lot of patience to figure out.
I also, whenever I play multiplayer and like, especially Tales of the Abyss, I'm always like, my rule is always like, no one play as Tyr, just let the AI do it. Like
They know what to do.
yeah. Thankfully, Tyr's healing spells are just a giant radius thing, so it's like you don't even really
Right.
have to worry about precision with the AI. You just kind of let
Just
it
let
do
it
its
do what it
thing.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um.
Uh,
So yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, going back to Arise, like I always felt like Arise doesn't feel like a Tales game.
I I think Arise is a victim of the Soulsborne series
Hmm.
because it went to shoulder button attacks, and I think they put some emphasis on parrying and blocking,
Yes.
and then they made your special attacks different. So you can't just do a regular combo and end it with a demon fang or something like that. Like,
Hmm.
it's strange. And then they give you like this Super Saiyan mode where you pull out a sword made out of rebar and fire. It it's strange. It's a very strange Tales of game.
It's interesting. Like I've noticed a lot of people, um, it was their first Tales game and they really liked it, and then they went back and played the older games and they didn't get it. And I was like, it's weird how this game brought in a ton of fans that didn't stick with it because it's such a different game. Meanwhile, it alienated all the longtime fans of the series. It was a very odd like shift that they went for.
Right. And, you know, I won't I'm not gonna say that this game pushed me away because I do want to get back into it, especially now that the DLC came out.
Mm.
Because I did like the dynamic between the main character and the female protagonist because they were from different kingdoms, so they kind of had like a Romeo and Juliet thing going on, but it was a bit more lethal because she would shoot you whenever
Yeah,
she would actually try to kill you whenever she got annoyed at you.
I like this like running thing they have with like back to back female protagonists that are kind of badass. Like
Right. Right. And the
I
fact that they gave her like a fucking rifle.
yeah,
That's her weapon. A rifle.
it kind of reminds me of it always goes back to Abyss, but Legretta's like weird like pistol guns that she had.
Right.
Uh,
Man. I I really like the way that it plays. I like the story and everything that I did see in Arise, but it's very jarring seeing it and then seeing where it came from.
you know
Even
what?
just seeing the game before, Berseria is like night and day different from it.
You know what was also really weird? They
Mhm.
right before this game came out, Namco had released, well, Bamco, I should say, had released another game called Scarlet Nexus, which It felt more like a Tales game than Tales of Arise did.
Dude, that game was anime garbage.
I know, but it felt
It
like a
was
Tales.
great.
It felt like a Tales game, and I was like, I remember playing, and I'm like, I'm like, I guess this is. I remember playing and thinking like, wow, this feels like a Tales game. I have high hopes for the next official Tales game, and then it comes out. I'm like, this doesn't feel like a Tales game.
Yeah,
I'm not sure
no.
what to think here.
Scarlet Nexus was a lot of fun. I still can't believe that I played both campaigns, and at the end, I was like, that wasn't long enough.
Yeah, I remember that game. That was like such a flash in the pan. Like it came out and everyone wouldn't shut up about it, and then it immediately disappeared.
Right. That's such an interesting game. So, you mentioned Tales of the World. There was also Tales of Versus. Did you ever see that one?
I've seen it. I've never played it though.
Okay. So it's Smash Bros. With Tales of characters.
Oh, why didn't they give us that? God damn it.
Right?
Namco.
And like it was on PSP. It was like perfect for
Oh, it's on
like a
PSP.
world. I think so, yeah.
I need to import that.
So you have like Lloyd and Yuri and Cress and all of these Tales of characters just on platforms fighting. It looks great. So I don't know why they didn't give us that, man. They just need to do like this compilation and just give us all the games that they never gave us.
Yeah, like there's also Tales of Heroes. I don't know what that one was about. Oh, that was a beat 'em up.
Oh, okay.
It was a Dynasty Warriors game. Okay.
Oh, even better.
What they made so many cool things and they just didn't give them to us, and they were all on the PSP too, which I find interesting.
All right.
So
like Tales of the World Radiant Mythology was such a good game that I created my character and I based it off of Senel because you had like the game where Senel was actually cool and you could do like his missions and everything, and I just set up my whole move set after his because I really like the brawlers in the Tales of series. So
yeah, God, I wish we got more. I never got it. Like they gave us Tales of the World, and then they just never gave us any of the other ones.
right.
I'm guessing
I
it
was like,
didn't
oh,
sell well.
it probably didn't. I remember when it came out, it took like 2 weeks to get to the GameStop at home back in Puerto Rico. And I would go every single fucking day to this GameStop and be like, "Is my game here?" And they're like, "No, it still hasn't arrived." It took me like 2 fucking weeks to get that game. Just
Uh,
awful.
so I had mentioned it when we were talking about doing this episode, but I wanted to do kind of to end this off. I want to do kind of like a personal ranking of like your favorite Tales games.
Okay.
Um, I figure I'll go first just to let you think about it real quick. But I was gonna just do my personal top five, and for me, it's pretty interesting. It's actually so in fifth I have Tales of Vesperia. Then I have Tales of Berseria. Um, believe it or not, third is actually Tales of Hearts R. Then Tales of Graces, and then of course Tales of the Abyss. And it's
Okay.
funny how Tales of Tales of Hearts R I ended up liking a lot more than I thought I would. Because like that game, when I played, well, I remember when that got announced, I pre-ordered that and picked it up day one because I was probably the biggest Vita nerd out of anybody in my area, and I didn't stop. I didn't put it down until I was done with it. Like it left that much of an impression on me to the point where like honestly, I got to play it again at some point because that game I think could possibly give Grace's a run for its money at some point.
Yeah. I know you like Graces, but for me, Graces is so low that any of the other Tales of would give it a run for its money. But thinking about it, I will say Vesperia. Berseria. Arise. No, not Arise. Tales of the World, because I really, really like Tales of the World. Symphonia and Abyss.
It's
Yes.
I think the only reason Symphonia doesn't make my list is just because I didn't grow up with it.
I mean, it was my first one. It made sense from the beginning, and like I said, a lot of the things that I saw in the game I had never seen before. I didn't even know that they were possible to be put into a game. Like all just having the main character lose her humanity as the game progresses, and the way that it's written and done in the game, it is just it's perfect.
Hmm.
Like that is a game that would benefit massively from a remake.
A true remake.
A true remake, yeah, from the ground up.
I mean, if we had a perfect world, like we'd have a remake of Symphonia and a remake of Abyss, and then that's all I'd
We would
need.
have shit. We would have like 5 ports of Abyss and a remake.
Honestly, the fact that Abyss got a port at all, I feel like it was like a love letter to those Abyss fans, because it's weird how like because I've gotten into arguments with people because they were always like Abyss is one of the most popular in the series. I'm like, is it? Like, I always feel like it's like the one that people like, but it's not. It doesn't get nearly the love that Symphonia or Vesperia do.
It's popular with the people that played it
Yeah, because like
because
it. If anything, it feels like the one that gets the most unnecessary hate for whatever reason.
and I don't get it. I think it might be because of Luke and that him being a shithead is important to the game.
Yeah,
Because
because the
if you have Luke being self-righteous and an amazing character and like this paragon of goodness, I don't think it would work.
it really wouldn't, because like you take away Luke's attitude in the first half of the game, it kind of kills like the impact that like Tyr, Jade, Natalia, Guy, Annis all have early in game, where they're basically like they call him out on all this shit. Like they're not gonna like just. Uh, there's points where like Luke is about to do something that's gonna get him in trouble, and they could stop him, but they don't because they want to see him learn.
Right. And like the parts where Natalia's helping people and Luke's like, stop touching them, they're dirty. And she's like, I don't give a fuck. I need to help these people. Like,
Yeah.
fuck off. And Luke is like offended because of what happened. They're
Or there's a
tough.
point early.
Mhm.
I was gonna say there's a point early on where Luke doesn't like to fight. Like he likes to use the sword, but he's afraid to actually kill people. And
Right.
there's a point where because he won't fight and he's not paying attention, he's about to get basically killed by a knight, and Tyr has to jump in and basically intercept it and cause herself
She
to
gets
be
hurt.
injured in
Yeah.
the process.
Yep. The first time he kills somebody, it he has a moment the first time he kills somebody. It's just as big of a shithead as he feels like the most human character in the Tales series. Like the one character that feels like what a normal person would go through having had to go through this journey.
Mm. Which is hilarious because he's the token non-human character of the group.
Right.
Depending
It's not
depending on how
Mew,
you
it's Luke.
I mean, Mew's more human than Luke is at times. Or thing, as he refers to him as.
The thing.
That's actually a skit later on too, where after he gets nice and stops referring to him as thing, Mew gets all like offended. He's like, "But that was the name you gave me, Master." And it's like, oh shit.
Isn't there like a part in the game where they like set up an ambush or a trap for somebody, and I think it's Jade and Tyr and Guy like attack the person, and Luke only does he grabs Mew and just hits him with Mew.
Yeah. Actually, one of my favorite moments is it's a completely optional area. So Mew is essentially the replacement for the Sorcerer's Ring in this game.
Right.
The Sorcerer's Ring is like a running item that appears in most of the Tales games, where it's essentially used to do puzzle solving. You actually can unlock a few bonus powers. Some of them are mandatory, a couple of them are optional. One of my favorites is where you unlock the Mew hover ability, where he can just kind of float in the air temporarily. And I love that scene because like the second you unlock it, all the characters are like, "Oh wow, that's so cool. Who's going to test it out?" And they're all arguing about it. And then it just cuts. It just says Tear just floating there in the air, and she's like, her comment is just, "It was so cute."
That's another thing. Tyr has a soft spot for cute things, and
Yeah.
every time that it happens, she's like hiding away from the entire group while they're all arguing. She's like, "It's so cute," until
There's also
Annis finds out.
yeah, there's also moments where she's like trying to like pet something, and it just she can't get to it because she's stuck in the background, and it just gets away from her, and she just gets so dejected.
That's great. That game is so good.
Tyr is like literally like whenever someone like mentions that their problem with Tales of the Abyss is Luke, I immediately just like my response is just like, yes, but it has Tyr. That makes your argument invalid.
Right. Tyr, such a great character.
She's just
man.
realistic. That's like honestly, all the characters in Abyss are realistic in a lot of ways.
Man,
Oh, actually, that one thing I thought of before we wrap it up, there is a great Easter egg in Graces. You said you finished Graces, right?
Mm-hmm.
So do you remember when you get into the second half of Graces, the second story? There's the very
Isn't
early.
it like a cave dungeon that you explore with the prince of the other kingdom after the war is over or something like
Yeah,
that?
it's like a
Yeah.
whole second storyline that's basically just explaining what happened
That they
after.
added onto the game. Yeah,
Yep.
okay. Yeah, I
So
remember that.
when that one starts, there's a running joke that Asbel's mom really wants him to get married, and he's got a whole list of suitors potentially. And you can actually read the list, and the first one that pops up is Anis Talon, and I'm just like, oh, that's. I remember commenting, I commented like, oh god, she's jumping through universes now.
Oh, Annis. That now that you mention that, I just remembered there's a Coliseum in most games.
Yes,
And in the Coliseum, you can fight characters from previous Tales of games.
yes, including ones we
Ye-
never got.
Yep. I know you can fight Leon, Cress, what was the float, the witch? You can fight her in one of the games. I know in later on games you can fight I think Lloyd,
Mhm.
Guy in one of the games you can fight him.
So
So
a
I
fun,
think go ahead.
a very fun one was in Graces actually. The character that you can fight in Graces is actually the lead female from Hearts. I forget what her name canonically is. They called her Amber for whatever reason, but that's not the name she has in Hearts. But she's one of the character that you fight in Graces, which is interesting.
That's pretty cool, man. I need ports. I need Bamco to just give us ports of all of the games that we currently don't have, so that I could go through them legally. Because I
Yeah.
could go through them on the Steam Deck if I wanted to, but I don't.
See, I feel like I have a pass because I have a physical version of every game in the series in
Mhm.
some form, so I don't feel as bad for playing a ROM.
See, I don't feel bad playing a ROM. I just want to play them on my TV.
That's true because I don't have a physical way of playing Rebirth on the TV, but I have the PSP version.
Okay.
Yeah,
Rebirth.
that was on the. It was originally a PS2 game. It was one of the 2D games, so it was the Team Destiny game.
Okay. All right. Gotta check. I'm gonna look that one up. Sounds kind of familiar.
So the ones we didn't get over here, mainline games, were we didn't get Destiny 2, the real Destiny 2, not Eternia, because Eternia was originally Destiny 2 over here because confusion.
There's fan translations of that game that you can find pretty easily.
Yes. So there was Destiny 2, there was Rebirth, Tales of the Tempest, Innocence, the original one, Original Hearts,
Two
and
Worlds
yes, there's Two Worlds, and then there's we didn't get
versus.
versus any of the Radiant Historia games after the first one, and we didn't get Innocence R either.
Okay, that's a good chunk of games.
Yep. And Bamco still doesn't appear to want to give us them.
Man, I know they said that what's his name? The lead for the Tales games now said that he wants to listen to fans and he's very interested on doing ports or remakes of games that the fans want. So hopefully the fans tell him the right games and we get them. Because
Yeah.
I really want the port of Abyss that's not on the 3DS that I can play on my PlayStation 5 or something.
You know what was the worst part of that Abyss port too? If you went on the 3DS store and you actually tried to buy it, it would literally say only available in retail. And it'd be like, God damn it. Why is it even here?
Oh, it's like a kick in the nuts, man.
Really, there was like certain games you just could not buy digitally. And it was like, why are they even on the store then?
Right? That's very annoying.
Yep. Other than that though, I don't think they've announced anything about the next main series game because it's been a couple of years. Like Arise was 2021, I want to say.
Yeah, they just released this past week the DLC for it. So I'm
Yes.
guessing that's supposed to tide us over for a year or two while we get the next one announced. Because don't they do a Tales of Festival every single year and they announce what's coming?
Yes, I believe they do.
Yeah. Plus, they're also doing the phone game, which I don't remember the name. It's Tales of something for the phone, which is basically your typical gotcha game with all of
Yep.
the Tales of characters ever going through an adventure or something.
Yeah.
So hopefully they don't focus on that and actually give us a game.
Yeah, I know, right? But yeah, other than that though, I think we've covered pretty much everything. Is there anything else you'd like to add, or do you want to get on to plugging your stuff next?
So let's see. If you've never played a Tales of game, please pick one up. If your only option is Symphonia, please just put on your This Is an Old Game glasses to get through it because it is a fantastic game, even though the version that they decided to give us as a port is pretty bad.
Yes.
But you cannot go wrong with Berseria, even though Arise is very new and very different. It's still a very good game. And that's pretty much it. I mean, if you can emulate them, go ahead, because that's a perfect way to do it. And with fan hacks and fan ROMs and all of that, I'm sure you can find a way to make these games play and feel like a modern game, even though they are pretty old. So they are definitely worth your time.
Yeah, I think Vesperia is also pretty much on everything nowadays too.
Oh yeah, and Vesperia is one of the old ones that feels like a new one. So it's a very good starting point too, even though I don't remember anything from the story.
That is fair.
Yeah.
All right. So do you want to plug your show?
Yeah. So I am the host of A Novel Console. It's a podcast that I do with my wife where we talk about books, games, and food. And basically, she tells me about the books that she reads. I tell her about the games that I play. And we have a grand old time for an hour where we just make fun of each other's likes and the stuff that we like as well. And then we just talk about maybe a restaurant that we went to over the weekend or whatever, and the food that we ate and what was good, what was bad, and end up giving it a rating depending on how good the food was. So
Nice.
So it's a little bit of something for everyone.
Nice. Yeah, I'll be sure to put links to that in the description for this episode. And no, thank you again for coming on, dude. This was great.
Oh yeah, no. Anytime you wanna bring me on to talk about anything that I know, because at least you got me on something that I know. It's Tales of. I'm more than happy to come on.
Thanks. No, I appreciate you coming on during Alex's hiatus, and we'll definitely try to get you on again at some point. I gotta shuffle through my topics. I'm trying to like sort out what Alex like gave me a list of games of topics where she's like, I don't care if I don't cover these, so I'm kind of like shuffling through them all now. So
that sounds fine. And hopefully, I get to go through Abyss sometime soon, so that we can do that episode on Abyss on my show. So
yeah,
I
no
want my
worries.
wife to read the manga because I'm pretty sure she would get into it if she read the manga. So
Abyss is interesting because there's like 3 different mangas for it, and like you got to kind of like sort through them. I know the one I have is the Ash manga that actually got translated and released over here. The other ones you have to kind of go through some. You got to sail the 7 seas to find, but
yeah, I just go to Mangaka Kalat. You'll find it there.
Yep. All right. But with that, everybody, once again, thanks for joining us on the Gaming and Collecting Podcast. Gaming and Collecting Podcast can be found on all your major podcasting platforms, particularly Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can find all of our links at linktree/The Barber Who Games. And if you'd like, you can join the GNC Podcast Network Discord server. Some crazy stuff happens there. Everyone's pretty nice. We have a weird obsession with Kermit the Frog as of late. I'll never understand, but it's a fun place to hang out. And with that, everybody, we will see you all next time.